Hello everybody, my name is Sankara and welcome back to the Yu-Gi-Oh! Quick Guide, the series where I tell you how to play Yu-Gi-Oh! In the simplest way possible. Today's episode we're going to be going over the different types of monsters as well as more advanced summoning mechanics. So, if you saw my first video, you would have heard about the different types of monsters. We've got normal monsters, effect monsters, which I went over in that video, but we didn't cover ritual monsters, pendulum monsters, and the extra deck monsters, that being Fusion, Synchro, Link, and Xyz. So that's what we're going to do in today's video. So we're going to start off with one of the main deck monsters, that being Ritual Monsters. As we've got here, Ritual Monsters are distinguished by this blue coloring. They also say Ritual next to their type. So on a Ritual Monster, everything is basically the same as every other monster, and included in their description, it will say the ritual spell that's needed to summon them. So you'll need a ritual spell to summon a ritual monster. It doesn't necessarily have to be that one, but I'll go over that in a second. So, for Blackluster Soldier here, you need the Blackluster Ritual, which I've got here. Blackluster Ritual. Now, to summon a ritual monster, you'll need its ritual spell and the monster itself, both in your hand, as well as monsters on your field or hand, whose total levels are equal to or more than the ritual monster. This is the general way to summon it. Certain cards say different things. Some of them you need to be exactly the same level as the monster. Just read your cards. That's the important things of all of these summoning mechanics, is that you read the cards. Read what it says specifically. It could be different. So, for Blackluster Ritual here, it says this card is used to summon Blackluster Soldier. You must also tribute monsters from your hand or field whose total levels equal 8 or more. So you need to have Blackluster Soldier in your hand, and monsters on your hand or field whose total levels equal 8 or more. So once you've got all that, you activate the spell card, Blackluster Ritual, then you tribute those monsters, which sends them to the graveyard. Again, it says tribute monsters from your hand or field, so you can tribute the level 1 Karibo plus level 7 Gaia, which equals level 8, and then special summon Blackluster Soldier straight from your hand, like so. Pretty simple. Also, I thought I should note that you don't have to tribute more than one monster. For example, you could activate Blackluster Ritual, tribute the single level 8 Blue Eyes White Dragon, and then special summon Blackluster Soldier, like that. After which, the ritual spell goes to the graveyard, and you're good to go. So that's ritual summoning. Pretty simple, right? Let's move on to the next one. Now, we'll forget pendulum summoning for now because they're complicated. Let's move on to fusion summoning. That was one of the originals. Let's do that. Alright, fusion summoning. If any of you have watched the Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime, you should know all about fusion summoning. So fusion monsters go in your extra deck. Your extra deck can have up to 15 cards in it, including Fusion, Synchro, Xyz, and Link. So fusion monsters are distinguished by their purple coloring. They also say fusion next to their type. And again, everything on a fusion monster is the same. You've got the level, attribute, name, type, and effect. In its effect, the first line will be in quotations, and it will say the fusion materials required to summon this card. That means which monsters you need to fuse to summon this card. So in the case of Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon, you need Blue Eyes White Dragon, plus Blue Eyes White Dragon, plus Blue Eyes White Dragon. So 3 Blue Eyes White Dragons. Then what you'll need is a fusion spell card, such as Polymerization. Well, a fusion card in general. Not all fusion cards are spell cards, sorry. But Polymerization was the original fusion card in the Japanese fusion. It's simply called Fusion. So, Polymerization, read its effects. For any card, just read its effect. Some fusion monsters, I should note, have their own summoning mechanics, depending on the monster, such as Gladiator Beasts and Neos fusions. So be sure to read their effects as well. It might say, summon it this way, don't use Polymerization. But this is the normal way to summon it. So, Polymerization, its effect is fusion summon one fusion monster from your extra deck using monsters from your hand or field as fusion material. So you can have the fusion materials from your hand or your field. Remember, the fusion materials are the first line in the fusion monster. 3 Blue Eyes White Dragons. Then you activate Polymerization. Send the fusion materials from your hand or field to the graveyard. And then special summon the fusion monster. This is a special summon. It is also known as a fusion summon. Now, when you summon a monster from the extra deck, you can either put it in the main monster zones, which are down here, or in an unoccupied extra monster zone, which are these two up here. Now, if you already have a monster in one of the extra monster zones, you can't put it in the extra monster zone, it has to go on the main zone. But otherwise, you can put it anywhere you want. And then polymerization goes to the graveyard. And that's that. Fusion summoning. Easy! Let's move on to synchros. Okay, synchro monsters were introduced in the Yu-Gi-Oh! 5D's anime. They are characterized by the white coloring, and they say synchro next to their type. Much like fusions, they have what's called synchro materials, which will be the first line on the card text. Now, all synchro monsters will require at least one tuna monster and at least one non-tuna monster. So what is a tuna monster? A tuna monster, I have an example here, Junk Synchron is a tuna monster. It will say tuna next to its type here. Tuna. Pretty simple, that's a tuna monster. These guys are not tuna monsters as they don't say tuna. So, once you have your one tuna monster and one or more non-tuna monsters, you can start a synchro summon. So, in order to synchro summon, first you have to look at the level of the synchro monster. In this case, Stardust Dragon is a level 8 synchro monster. Then you need a tuna and one or more non-tunas whose total levels equal 8. They have to equal 8 combined. Can't be more, can't be less, has to be 8. Has to be the same level as the synchro monster you're trying to summon. Basic math, no problem. So, then you tune your level 3 tuna monster, Junk Synchron, by sending it to the graveyard, with the non-tuners. In this case we have level 3 Shield Warrior and level 2 Shield Wing. So 3 plus 3 is 6, plus 2 is 8. And then you can synchro summon your synchro monster again to either your main monster zone or an extra monster zone. Simple. Synchro summons. Easy. Now, some synchro monsters have their own special, it's not always just one tuna and one non-tuna. For example, Atomic Scrap Dragon requires one Scrap Tuna, which is when a card effect has the quotations like that, it means the name has to include that. So, a Scrap Tuna is a tuna monster that is scrap in its name, much like Atomic Scrap Dragon, except that's a synchro monster. Plus 2 or more non-tuners. Some require 2 or more, 3 or more, not necessarily just 1 or more. So keep that in mind, make sure you read the specific materials, but in most cases it will just be 1 tuna plus 1 non-tuna, and their levels must always, no matter what the materials, they must always equal the level of the monster you're trying to summon. Alright, next up we have Xyz monsters. Xyz monsters are characterized by this black coloring, and they've got little stars in the black as well. And they will say Xyz next to their type. XYZ, that's Xyz. Now, another thing to note about Xyz monsters is that they do not have levels. Xyz monsters don't have levels. Instead, they have what's called a rank, and it's stars on the opposite side of where the level is. So levels are on this side, ranks are on this side. They do not have levels. This is important for any card that says that it requires levels. They don't have levels. You can't use Xyz monsters to synchro summon, for example, because they don't have any levels. So, once again, it will say its materials right up top, in this case 2 level 4 monsters. Now for an Xyz monster, you'll always need at least 2 monsters whose levels are the same as the rank of the monster you're trying to summon. In this case, it's 2 level 4 monsters. Sometimes it's more than 2. Again, read the materials, read the effect. They also have their own card effects, etc, etc, same as every other card. So, how do you Xyz summon? First, you need 2 monsters of the same level, whose level equals the rank of the monster you're trying to summon, and then you overlay them, that meaning you put one on top of the other, like so, and then you put the Xyz monster on top of that, so overlay that onto them. And that is an Xyz summon, and of course you can put it in the extra monster zone if you wish. Now these cards, this is where things get complicated with terminology. So these cards used to summon it are called Xyz material. They may also be referred to as overlay units, and they are attached to the Xyz monster. They are not monsters themselves, they don't have effects or anything, they are attached to the Xyz monster. So for example, if we look at Utopia's effect here, when a monster declares an attack, you can detach one material from this card, negate the attack. So detaching it means, so again, these 2 are materials, they are the materials of this, and you detach them which means taking it out and sending it to the graveyard, like so. Another thing to note is that this is not counted as being sent from the field to the graveyard, they are just sent to the graveyard. So if they have an effect that says this card is sent to from the field to the graveyard, that effect will not activate because it doesn't count. And they're not treated as monsters on the field. If the Xyz monster that they are attached to is removed from the field, they go to the graveyard too. Simple. Alright, that's everything you need to know about Xyz monsters. Next up we have Link Monsters. Link Monsters are the newest extra deck monster. They are characterized by this blue coloring with hexagon patterns, and they also have these arrows around them. Plus, they will say Link next to their type. Several things you might notice about a Link monster. First of all, once again, they do not have a level up here. So any card that requires a level, they do not have levels. Instead, down the bottom corner here, they have a Link rating. In this case, Link 2. Now, the Link rating will also determine how many arrows are lit. So you'll notice this has 2 arrows lit up. All Link monsters are surrounded by arrows. They have different amounts of arrows lit up, and I will explain what that means soon. But first, that's what you need to know. So they have a Link rating, they have arrows, they have no level. They are Link monsters. And they go in the extra deck. Once again, like all extra deck monsters, they have their materials here. In Security Dragon's case, it is 2 monsters. To summon a Link monster, you'll always need at least 2 monsters, but you need as many monsters as the Link rating. So for Security Dragon's case, it needs 2 monsters. It is a Link 2. It requires 2 monsters. Now, this will get a little complicated, so I'll explain that soon. So, 2 monsters, Link 2 requires 2 monsters. So to summon a Link monster, determine its Link rating, which is Link 2, check its materials, 2 monsters, then you send 2 monsters from the field to the graveyard. Special summon your Link monster. Now, a Link monster, this is where things start to get complicated. Unless you already have a Link monster on the field, you have to summon your Link monster in an unoccupied extra monster zone. Now, this is where the arrows come in. So, you'll notice that the arrows are pointing to a different location. So in this case, the arrows is pointing here and down here. That means that Link monsters can be summoned in these zones. Easy enough. This also means that your opponent can summon their Link monsters in a zone that your one points to. You cannot summon your Link monsters there, however. Now, another way to summon a Link monster is instead of... Let's look, for example, at our other Link monster, Firewall Dragon. You'll notice this says 2+ Link monsters, yet it is a Link 4. That means it needs 4 monsters, right? Not necessarily. You can also use the Link rating of a Link monster. So this is a Link 2, meaning it counts as 2 monsters for the summon of another Link monster. So you could use this single one to summon another Security Dragon. Well, you couldn't because it requires 2 monsters, but you get the idea. So, in the case of our boy Firewall Dragon, it's Link 4, so it needs 4 monsters. Security Dragon is a Link 2, that counts as 2 monsters. So you send that one, plus 2 more, to the graveyard to summon Firewall Dragon. And you notice it says 2+ monsters, so you couldn't just use a single Link 4 to summon Firewall Dragon, you need at least 2 monsters. You could use a Link 3+1 monster, for example, or you could just use 4 monsters. Now let's chuck this back in our extra deck and summon these 2. So, like I explained before, the arrows are pointing to certain zones. That means you can summon a Link monster there, so if I were to send these 2 to the graveyard, I can now summon Security Dragon in the zone that the Link monster points to, which is down here. Now, if for example you manage to get a Link monster over here, and you already have a Link monster in an extra monster zone, this is how you can steal the other extra monster zone with an extra deck monster. If you can summon it, you can put it in the other extra monster zone if there is a Link monster pointing to that zone. Does that make sense? I hope so. So the arrows tell you where you can summon monsters. Link monsters can only be summoned to either an extra monster zone or where an arrow points to. And if you already have a monster in an extra monster zone, you can't summon one to the other one unless a Link monster points to it. Okay, that's all for the extra deck monsters. There is one more type of monster that we have to go over, and that is Pendulum Monsters. So let's set up the board and I'll explain that to you now. Okay, Pendulum Monsters, probably the most difficult monster to understand. They look like this. Pendulum Monsters are half spell, half monsters, so in the deck and in your hand and in the monster zone, they are counted as monsters. They are only treated as spell cards when they're in the Pendulum zone, which are these two on either side of your spell and trap card zone. So, if you have a Pendulum Monster in your hand, you can either summon it normally like a monster, so if it's a level 4 or lower, you summon it without a tribute. If it's level 5 or higher, you need tributes to summon it, and you can summon it as a monster in a monster zone, like that. Now, when in the monster zone, it is treated as a monster. It is a Pendulum Monster, and it has its monster effects. So you'll notice the Pendulum Monsters share characteristics of spells and traps. So they have a level, they have types, says Pendulum, effect, etc., attack and defense. So while in the monster zone, a Pendulum Monster has its monster effect, which is down here under its type, etc., and the spell effect, or Pendulum effect is what it's called, is up here. So while in the monster zone, you ignore the Pendulum effect, look only at the monster effect. Everything else goes the same, just treat it as a monster. Now, a Pendulum Monster in your hand can also be activated to one of your Pendulum zones as a spell card. So you activate left and activate right. You can't put them in any other spell track card zone, they have to go left or right. Now, while in the Pendulum zones, they are treated as spell cards. This is the only time that they are treated as spell cards. While in the Pendulum zone, you have their Pendulum effect, which is the effect in the box above, and it is their spell effect. Now, you'll also notice they have these little arrows here. This is the Pendulum scale. So, Stargazer Magician has a Pendulum scale of 1, and Timegaze Magician has a Pendulum scale of 8. So what does this mean? Well, while you have 2 Pendulum Monsters in the Pendulum zones as spell cards, you can special summon as many monsters from your hand as you wish, whose levels are between the Pendulum scale. So we've got 1 and 8, that means we can special summon as many monsters as we want from our hand, whose levels are 2 to 7. So this is called a Pendulum Summon as well, so we Pendulum Summon, special summon all of these monsters from our hand. That is a Pendulum Summon. The final thing to note about Pendulum Monsters is that if they were to go from the field to the graveyard, they instead go face up on your extra deck, like that. Even if they're sent from the spell and trap card zone, they go face up on the extra deck. So, what can you do with cards face up on the extra deck? So again, if you have 2 monsters in your Pendulum zone, not only can you special summon any amount of monsters from your hand, but you can also special summon monsters, Pendulum Monsters, who are face up in your extra deck. So I've got a scale 1, scale 8, so I can summon levels 2 to 7. I have a face up level 7 Odd Eyes Pendulum Dragon in my extra deck, so I can special summon this. Now, much like Link Monsters, these monsters have to be special summoned to the extra monster zone. Which means normally you can only summon 1 at a time from your extra deck, unless, however, much like Link Monsters, if you have a Link Monster on the field, you can special summon your Pendulum Monsters to a zone that monster points to. So it points down, you can special summon it there. Now this only applies if they're being summoned from the extra deck. If they're being summoned from the hand, graveyard, anywhere else, they go to the main monster zone. Only if they're special summoned from the extra deck do they go to either the extra monster zone or a zone a Link Monster points to. I hope that all made sense enough. That's the basics of Pendulum Summoning. That's simple enough, right? Yeah, so you have your Pendulum scales, 1 and 8 written up here. Summon any amount of monsters whose levels are between 1 and 8. When they're in the Spell and Trap card zone, they have their Spell and Trap effects. When in the Monster zone, they have their Monster effects. That's that. That's all you need to know about summoning in Yu-Gi-Oh! So, one more thing I forgot to point out when talking about Link Monsters is that Link Monsters do not have defense points. Link Monsters cannot go in defense position. They must always be in attack mode. You cannot put a Link Monster in defense mode at all. It doesn't have defense points. They don't go in defense mode. Can't happen. Ever. They also can't be set. So that is the basics of all the summoning mechanics and all the monsters. One other thing to note about special summoning is that in any case, when you special summon a monster, it goes face up. Even if you're special summoning in defense, it always goes face up unless it says otherwise. But if you do have to special summon in face down defense position, some cards do that, then you have to show your opponent what you're special summoning first, and then you put it face down. Okay, that is everything you need to know about the different types of monsters. I hope you've enjoyed this video and found it useful. It wasn't too bad, right? It wasn't too bad. Things get a little complicated when you start special summoning, but that's the basics of it. Just read your cards, always read your cards. Pro tip, always read your cards. That's the most important part of Yu-Gi-Oh! Read your cards, do what they say. That's all you need to know, really. That's all you need to know. It's as simple as that. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you have enjoyed this video. Leave a like and subscribe. If you did, I will have more videos on how to play Yu-Gi-Oh! Coming out later. But after watching this and the videos before it, you should basically know everything you need to know. From here on, it's just more advanced stuff, things that may come up. And that they are important to know, of course, they are important to know, but you can play without it. You can play with what you have now. You can play Yu-Gi-Oh! You can play the game. So if you have a friend, of course, who you want to play Yu-Gi-Oh! Show them this video, get them learning, get yourself learning. Thank you all so much for watching. Comment any questions down below, and until next time, see ya.